Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session on bike fitting. I'm Geoff Demelo, owner of Demelo's Velos. I am a level 1 bike fit certified bike fitter with Bike Fit Canada. I'm also a professional mechanic and an NCCP certified triathlon coach. Today we're going to be discussing bike fitting and the three main contact points. We're going to talk about the foot pedal interface, we're going to talk about the saddle, and we're going to talk about the handlebars. So to start off, we're going to be talking this morning about the foot pedal interface. So we're going to discuss cleated and non-cleated pedals, and we're going to discuss positioning of cleats and how to get the most out of your pedals. So we're going to be talking about the foot pedal interface. And what that means is the contact point of your foot on the pedal. So when we're talking about cleated and non-cleated version pedals, we have cleated, which are similar to this, where they have the shoe with a built-in cleat, and this cleat clips into the pedal. A non-cleated version is your standard pedal that you would see on a Canadian Tire style bicycle. With those bicycles, you can't adjust any position point on the foot pedal interface. So if you're looking to get some correction either for discomfort, pain, or efficiency, you'll need to upgrade to a clipless pedal. That means you'll be required to buy a shoe, cleats, and a new pedal system for your bicycle. Now with the cleated version, we have a cleat that is adjustable in terms of its fore-aft position, so up forward towards the toe and aft towards the heel. But we also have a lateral adjustment that we can make, which is left-right lateral adjustment, and we have a twist adjustment, meaning that we can twist the cleat, which will alter our position of our foot when it makes contact with the pedal. For now, all we're going to discuss is the fore-aft position. What happens when we install our cleat onto our pedal is we're positioning where our foot is going to sit on the pedal. Now what we're looking for is for our foot to have the fifth metatarsal. That's, if this is your foot and this is your pinky, the fifth metatarsal is this joint right here on your baby toe, and you're going to be looking to have this lined up over the axle of the pedal. And this will give you the most efficient pedaling position. You're able to drive through that pedal with the most appropriate amount of energy and force, and you're going to have the most comfort doing that. Now that's for the majority of people. Of course there are people with injuries and we have to make modifications to that. But for the large majority of us, we're going to be looking to line our fifth metatarsal up right over that axle on the pedal. Now how we do that is when we install our new cleat, most of the shoes will come with markings on it, little engraved lines of where you want to position your cleat. And each cleat also comes with a marking on either side. And so what you're going to do is you're going to line the marking up with the indentation on the shoe, and you're going to snug these number 5 bolts into place. And then you're going to torque them down to about 5 Newton meters. And that will give you a really good starting position to ensure that your foot is in the most ideal position for pedaling. So when we clip into our pedal, like I was saying earlier, we want our fifth metatarsal, which would roughly be around here, to line up over the axle of our pedal. The axle of our pedal is the center point of our pedal that the pedal rotates on. So we're going to line up our fifth metatarsal over that point. And we do that simply by adjusting the cleat so that when we put our foot in the pedal, our foot in the shoe rather, our fifth metatarsal will line up. So we'll manipulate that by loosening off the cleat and pushing the shoe slightly forward, the cleat back a bit towards the aft, and then we'll try it, and then we'll make adjustments fore and aft until we get our 5th metatarsal lined up over our axle spindle. And again, that'll give us the most, for most of us, that'll give us the perfect starting point for fit and for comfort and for efficiency. And so that's all we're really looking for right now. If we want to start thinking about injuries and discomfort and how do we go from there, or if you're already in a position where you've done that basic step and you're lined up and you're centered, but you're still having knee pain, or you're having some labral pain, or your piriformis pain or discomfort, then we're going to have to look at something a little bit more, an adjustment that's a little bit more complicated. And we're going to have to start looking at lateral adjustments and twist adjustments, which we're not going to cover here. So if you have any of those kinds of questions, please feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss that one-on-one. Now, another important thing to remember is that even though we're making minor adjustments to the cleat and to our foot position, that is going to have a knock-on effect. So that is going to affect our saddle position, the fore-aft position of our saddle. So by pushing the cleat forward onto the pedal, what's happening is we're moving our foot position back, and as we move our foot position back, our body will shift back, which means that we're going to sit further back on our saddle, and our saddle is now in a position likely too far forward. So every adjustment we make has a knock-on effect. So that's why we start at the pedal and we make our adjustments on our cleats before we move on to the next step, which will be our saddle. So the next thing we're going to be discussing is saddle adjustment and how we can best adjust our saddle. But before we get to that, most people ask, where am I supposed to be driving? How is my foot supposed to be driving through my pedal? Well, ideally we have 3 positions that we pedal with. Some people are toe pointers and will point their toe as they pedal through. Some people are heel drivers and they drive their heel. But what we want is to be a flat-footed individual. We want to keep our foot rotating in a nice flat position so that we can get the most out of it. As we come here, we drive through. We're just going to have a slight toe, downward toe point, and as we come through, we're going to pull up with a slight toe point. But for the most part, we're in a nice flat position. If you're driving with the heel, you may experience some discomfort and pain in your lower back, in your labrum, or in your calf or Achilles. Similarly, if you're in an extreme toe pointer, you may have some of those difficulties or discomforts as well. So we're going to be discussing saddle position, and similar to the pedal foot interface, the saddle position has 3 adjustments that can be made. So again, we have a fore-aft adjustment, a height adjustment, but we can also do a tilt adjustment as well. Now, everyone gets bogged down by degrees and measurements, and everyone says, well, I have a goniometer or I don't have a goniometer. How am I supposed to know where the angle is supposed to be, what angle I'm supposed to be at? Yes, there's an ideal. 27 to 37 degrees is the ideal measurement to be in, but we're not professionals, and what we're looking at here is comfort and efficiency. And if you're either at 24 or 25 or 38 degrees, you're just outside those margins, but it's the most comfortable fit position for you, then that's what we're looking for. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time focusing on getting into a 27 to 37 degree window. We do know that the 27-37 degree window exists, And I'm going to show you what that window looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop the leg here. We're going to find the hip bone right there. We're going to, so this is a perfect 37-degree measurement right here. So this is what you're looking for at max extension, and this is where we're going to get 37 degrees. Now the 27 degrees is not that far off. The 27 degree is going to be, if we can get it there we go. So that's the 27 degree range right there. So it's not much. What you notice is that the knee is not at full extension. Almost at full extension. In some cases, for a lot of people, it may feel like it's at full extension because we have a mobility restriction. But it's not quite at a full extension, and we're still able to generate most of our driving force from our hip, which is where we want to be getting that driving force from. It's from the hip, not from the knee. We want to drive from the hip. So when you're adjusting your saddle height, you want to try to get somewhere between just shy of max extension to a little bit more of a knee bend. And you're going to look for that range where you can get the most comfort and yet you can still drive the most from the hip. Now, if you're someone who has an injury or has severe pain or discomfort, I highly recommend that you see a fit specialist so that we can get you fitted properly on the bike so that we can avoid any further injuries, any further discomfort, and we can get you riding comfortably and happy. So the next thing we're going to discuss is we're going to discuss the fore-aft position of the saddle. So we're going to talk about saddle position now and the fore-aft position. And like I was mentioning earlier, if we make an adjustment to our cleat and the position in relation to the shoe, we're going to change our position in our saddle as to where we contact the saddle. Now, ideally, on the saddle, you want your two sit bones, those are the two bones in the medial part of your buttocks, you want them to be in the largest part or the widest part of the saddle. That's where you want those sit bones to be, so that they can be making direct contact with as much material as possible. And that's what we want. We want to feel those sit bones driving into the saddle so that we know that they're making contact, and that way we're not putting any pressure points anywhere else. We're not putting it on our scrotum, we're not putting it anywhere on our genitals that can cause discomfort or pain, and we're not having it ride anywhere on our buttocks that's going to cause some kind of rashing or discomfort when we're doing a longer ride. So when we adjust our cleat, we now have changed our position as to where we make contact with the saddle. So if I have pushed my cleat all the way forward, what's happening? Well, I've now pushed myself back onto the saddle, so I need to jam my saddle towards the aft. And if I've climbed and I've done the opposite and I've jammed the cleat all the way towards the aft, well, now I'm sitting on the nose, or more likely if I was already in a somewhat correct position, I'm sitting now on the nose of my saddle, and now I need to jam my saddle forward to make sure that my sit bones are making contact with the meaty part of the saddle. So again, just remember that if you're making adjustments to your cleats, you now need to make adjustments to your saddle fore-aft position, or at least check your saddle fore-aft position. And it's usually easier if you have someone with you. You try to get them to see where you are sitting on the saddle. So you can tell them, okay, my sit bones, I can feel my sit bones right here. And they can tell you roughly how far off you are, and they can assist you in making the adjustments. Now, for most of us, it'll probably be small adjustments that need to be made. But for some of us, we need to make a very bold adjustment. And it's better if you notice that you're 1.5 inches or greater away from the meaty part, just make that really bold adjustment. And once that bold adjustment is done, you can start dialing in the specific position. Now the final adjustment we can make with the saddle is the tilt adjustment. And what the tilt adjustment is we can tilt the nose down. And I know this is a very aggressive tilt, but just to demonstrate, we can either tilt the nose down or we can tilt the nose in an upward position. Ideally, what we're trying to achieve for a starting point is a level tilt position. So get a small level, place it on, first you're going to make sure that your bike is level, but then secondly you're going to make sure that your saddle is level. You're going to place a small level on the saddle, and you're just going to level it off. So all you're going to do for most of them is just unscrew a bolt in the back, and then you'll be able to, with 2 fingers and 2 hands, just manipulate the saddle and the rails to get it into a position that is level. And then you can tighten the bolt back up. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, knock-on effects. If we change our saddle position, either fore, aft, up or down, or add a tilt or remove a tilt, we're going to have to change our position of our handlebars likely. And we'll get that in a second. But before we do, why are we going to change the tilt? Well, usually we're going to change the tilt to relieve some sort of pressure. And hopefully we don't need to do that because we've found the right position for our sit bones and we're able to get into the right position and we can ensure that we're at our most comfortable point and we're using the meatier part. So how do we find the right saddle for us is the question. And we'll get into that in a bit more detail, because what I often get is, my ass hurts, I need a bigger saddle. Can you do that? And the simple answer is yes, no. Yes, we can get you a bigger saddle. No, we're not going to do it necessarily. So why? Because we need to find out, is the saddle width that you have appropriate? So how do we determine that? Well, we do a simple measurement. So for people, I would actually measure out, I'll find their sit bones, and I'll measure out the distance between their sit bones, and then I add a couple millimeters each side, and then you measure the width of the largest part of the saddle, and you can determine whether the saddle is wide enough for them or not. And in most cases, it's okay. We don't need to change the saddle, we just need to change the position. And yes, there's all kinds of different materials and what is best. A lot of it is comfort. You might find that you prefer something over someone else. Someone might like riding on a carbon, where someone prefers riding on a gel. But in terms of width, that's how we find it. So how do you yourself find that measurement? Well, it's quite simple, really. What you're going to do is you're going to get a piece of corrugated cardboard and you're going to place it on a wooden chair or a bench, and then you're going to sit down on it and you're going to push into it with your buttocks, and you're going to create 2 little indentations. And when you create those 2 indentations, what you're going to do is you're going to make an X in each one. And then you can measure the distance between those 2 indentations. And that'll give you your width. And then again, we're going to add a few millimeters either side so that we can have our total size. So when I say a few, we're talking 5. No more than 5. And that'll give us the total width that we should not exceed for our saddle width. And we want to be within that exact number plus 5 to 10 millimeters for saddle. The other question I get often is, what saddle should I be riding? Well, I am not a big fan of supporting any one product because there's a lot of products out there that are really good, really great. I have tested a lot of saddles. I own about 23 different saddles, and I have tested a bunch of them. And I have found one product which stands apart, and I highly recommend it. It is called the Bi-Saddle, and it is a fully adjustable shape shifting saddle. So what do I mean by that? Well, this saddle comes with three different style wedges. So not only can we adjust the dimension, the width of the saddle, so the saddle will then can open up in the back, it can open up in the front, you can move the whole saddle out on both sides, but you can also decide to have a tilt on your saddle, or either a tilt downwards or a tilt upwards. You have the option, and it gives you a full range of motions that you can use to customize your fit on this saddle. It's fully adjustable. They've done tons of testing. So there's no wedge, there's a flattening wedge, and then there's a rounding wedge, and you can just fully adjust this saddle and customize it. And this is by far this is my saddle of choice, and I have it on all my bikes, and I've fit tons of people on this saddle, and they love it. So if you're really shopping for a saddle, I recommend you look into the Bi-Saddle. Now be aware it is a pricey saddle. We're talking anywhere between $400 and $600. So it is expensive, but it's probably likely one of the last saddles you'll ever buy. So the final adjustment that we're going to be making will be to the handlebar or the cockpit region. So we've made an adjustment to our cleats, which has caused us to make an adjustment to our saddle, which now is going to force us to make an adjustment to our cockpit. And just like when you're sitting and riding, you want to have a 27 to 37 degree angle from your hip to your knee to your ankle. When you're riding, there's a preferred angle range, and that's a 90 degree angle. So from your back, your lower back, up to your shoulder blades, and then down your arms to your contact point where your hands touch, you want to have roughly a 90 degree angle in those joints. And again, this is something that's easier achieved with a professional fitter, or when you have a secondary person, or if you have a goniometer, which most of us don't have. So if we can make some changes here. We want to try and keep those angles in mind so that we can try and stay within them, so that we don't cause risk or injury or increase our discomfort, but rather, like I said earlier, we're looking to increase our overall performance, and we're going to do that by decreasing our comfort. So the positions on our cockpit that we can change, well, there's actually 5 of them. So we can adjust our height, our stem height, our handlebar height. We can adjust our stem length. We can adjust the rotation of our handlebars. We can adjust the position of our levers. So our levers can be rotated higher, they can be brought lower, but we can also adjust our lever medial lateral placement. So we can twist it in or twist it out. And all those will change the way we contact the bike and the way we ride. So keeping in mind that ideally we want to try and get a 90 degree position, when we come in contact with the bike, we also want to have a natural arm wrist position. So what does that look like? Well, a natural wrist position is when your arm hangs down, your wrist is going to be in a neutral position. And that's the same type of position we want to mimic when we contact our levers and our hoods. So as you can see, when I make contact, I'm not articulated in one direction or hyper articulated in another direction. I'm in a relatively neutral position. My wrist and arm are pretty straight without any severe bend. So that's what we're looking for. The lateral and medial adjustment that we can make on our levers, moving them in or out, is going to be pressure points, and it's going to be comfort and contact. So for some of us, we may have a wrist injury and we can't bend our wrist in a certain direction. So we're going to compensate. We're going to have a slight tilt in our lever. We're going to tilt it in, and that's going to make it more comfortable, and we're going to have a smaller contact point, and it's going to alleviate any discomfort. And so how do we do that? Well, that's a great question. To make these adjustments, you have to remove the hood. And once you remove the hood, there's a 5mm bolt inside that you're going to loosen. And once you loosen that 5mm bolt, you're going to be able to adjust laterally, medially the lever. But at the same time, if you need to, you can adjust the height of the lever as well. Now keep in mind, if you're going to be adjusting the height of the lever, you're going to need to start to undo some of the bar tape, because the bar tape wraps around the lever and really fixes it into place. And if you want to start adjusting the height, you really need to be removing the bar tape to do that. Now some people feel like when they're riding, they're crouched, and that's likely due to reach. So how do we adjust that? The size of the bike is correct for them. They have good positioning in their legs. They're making good contact with their saddle and their sit bones, but they're crouched in the torso. So it comes to a conversation about reach. And to adjust our reach, we really have to change out this stem. So stems range in pitch. So they pitch from 0 degrees up and 0 degrees down. Usually you'll see a 0 degrees to a -5 or a +5 pitch on a stem. But they also range from 60 millimeters in length to 120 millimeters in length. I've even seen one as long as 150 millimeters in length. And so what that does is that really, if we're crouched, as we change the length of our stem, that's going to bring our hands out, and that's going to open us up, which is important for our breathing and for our posture, for our shoulders, so that we're not rolled over, for our back, so that we're not bent and that we have a nice flat back. And so those are important. Again, if you're really crouched over, you're going to really want to try a couple different stem lengths to really find out how much reach you need for the ideal positioning. But if you're relatively close to that 90-degree position, your back is almost perfectly flat, you're pretty comfortable, but you feel like you're just not quite out there enough, just go up by 10 millimeter reach. So if you're at a 90, go up to 100. If you're at 110, go up to 120. And similarly, if you're feeling like you're just reaching slightly too far and you've adjusted your levers back a bit and that hasn't helped you, then drop down in stem length so that you can really sit up a bit more and you're not really overstretching. Now we've talked about the reach, we've talked about the rotation, the lateral and medial rotation of the lever. We've talked about the lever placement in terms of height and in terms of adjusting that. We've talked about our reach. We're going to be discussing right now the bar rotation. Now ideally when I set up a bike And what I try to do is I try to get the bottom part of the handlebar right here, in what we commonly call our drops, into a parallel position with the top bar here, the top seat post, sorry, not seat post, the top tube. And that's a relatively neutral starting position for most people. And for most people, that's perfect. That's where they want to be. But for some people, when they get into their drops, which we don't tend to ride in too much, but if we do get into our drops, we still want to have that nice neutral position. And this is where you want to change the rotation, is if you're in your drops, you're trying to ride in your drops, but you're finding that your wrists are cocked or they're really squished, then you're going to make a small adjustment. And how we do that is on the front of our stem, we either have 4mm or 5mm bolts. There's 4 of them. We loosen them off, and then we can grab our handlebars and we can rotate them either up or down. And then what we do is we make small adjustments, really small adjustments, and then lock it back in tight, and then we check the position. And each time we do that, we get on the bike and we have to ride. After every adjustment, we have to ride for a bit, just to see how it feels. And then you're gonna know, as soon as you make an adjustment and you get on, you're gonna know if it's the right adjustment for you or not. And it's very important before we make any adjustments that we always mark. So before we make an adjustment, we mark our starting point, so we know where our starting point is, and we can always get back to that if we need to. And the last thing is height. We can adjust height. Now, not all bikes will have that ability to adjust height, but most of them do. And when bikes come, they come with spacers, and usually there's a bunch of spacers underneath the stem, and then you'll have a huge stack of them, and then you'll have your stem and your handlebars are on top. And what we do is we remove the stem, remove some of the spacers, and we'll find that position, we'll drop it down, because most of us don't need to be riding so high. And then after we've ridden a couple times, we'll cut it. So if you're buying a used bike, it's very possible that you're going to find that you're in a position that you won't be able to adjust it because it's been cut, and it may be too short for you. So really, before you buy a bike, you like the look of it, check the height, see if there's any height that can be adjusted on it, either increased or decreased. And you'll notice that's possible by the number of spacers that are either above or below the stem. And if you can't, then you really need to ride that bike for a good ride. And most people who are selling bikes, they don't mind going out for a ride with you to see, to check, so you can check out the bike, because cyclists want to sell the bike and they want someone to buy it who's going to use it and be happy. They don't want to sell you the bike just to offload it normally. So they don't mind getting out and making sure that it fits you properly and that you're happy with it. So, if you get there and you notice that the stem has no adjustment capability at all, sorry, not the stem, if you notice that there's no height adjustment capability at all because there's no spacers and it's slammed all the way down, the stem is slammed all the way down and there's no spacers above it, then really try to make sure you can get that test ride in. But why do we adjust the height? Well, either we're sitting up too tall in our riding position and we're not able to achieve that nice 90-degree angle, and we need to lower the saddle, lower the handlebars, drop it. So we remove the stem, we'll remove some spacers, we'll slide the stem down. And now the spacers come in different increments, right? You have some that'll be 2.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters, some are 5 millimeters, you even have 10 millimeter spacers. There's going to be a variety of them on there. And so you can mess around with these spacers, trying to find the right fit combination for you to get that perfect adjustment. Now, if there's 2.5 millimeter spacers, I recommend that you start by removing or adding those 2.5 millimeters. So how do we add spacers? Great question. We remove the stem and we take the spacer from the top and slide it on, and then we put the stem back in place. Where can you get spacers? Well, most of the time you can go into a bike shop and you can order some spacers from them. They may have some on hand. You can sometimes find spacers on Amazon as well, but you also need to keep in mind your steer post diameter, because if you buy spacers and you buy the wrong diameter, then they're not going to be effective. So I recommend that if you're going to try and buy your own spacers, then remove your stem, get a caliper, measure your steer post diameter so that you can go and get the right diameter of spacers. So that's the adjustments that we can make in our cockpit region. So that's a bit of the basics on bike fitting. I hope that you guys got something out of today's session, and we will be coming back with a couple short quick videos on some tuning things that you can do on your bike at home. So how to adjust a rear derailleur, how to adjust your front derailleur, how to properly clean a chain, things like that. Just little things that you guys can do at home to keep your bike running and keep you on the road. So thanks for joining, and I hope you guys can get out and enjoy a nice ride.